I'm here with Bill Miesse, author of Sudden Solitary, longtime resident of Mount Shasta, who's been here over 30 years and knows a great deal about the mystique of the mountain and the area. I'd like to thank you today for taking the time to go over that with us and share some of the stories that you've learned over the years.
Right. So what happened was I moved here 30 years ago, and I bought an old painting in Mount Shasta. And that painting, it's in this book that I wrote out of this journey. Well, as part of that research, I came into contact with all the legends of Mount Shasta. And it turns out that a lot of the legends are illustrated by artworks. So there kind of was this synchronicity or symbiosis of art and history and the spiritual legends of the Mount Shasta. So I gained this kind of insight into a lot of these legends, maybe in a more detailed way than most folks are used to. And then I was hired by the college here in our area to go through their collection of Mount Shasta materials, 3,000 books and articles. So I read them all, those portions that were directly relating to Mount Shasta, and out of those I took about 1,500 of them, almost half of them, and wrote them up in what they call a bibliography. It's a research book that takes the book, and I took quotes out of each, and as I was doing this work, I could see these linkages between items, and it really became a giant kind of hypertext before hypertext was even part of, this was back in the 1980s, was even part of the vocabulary, but things were linked. And I got a real good sense of what was going on with some of these legends. Now, what I did here was to kind of show the origins of the different legends of Mount Shasta, and there's basically 5. This diagram here basically shows 5 legends of our area. First would be, there's Philos the Tibetan, the inner Mount Shasta, city inside Mount Shasta. That started in the 1880s with the publication of a book called A Dweller on Two Planets. And in 1931, the Lemuria legend of Mount Shasta really started in earnest with the lost continent of the Pacific, the mystery people of Mount Shasta. Talks about Lemuria just in briefly, but mostly it's about Atlantis. And there was Atlantis civilization inside Mount Shasta. Then in 1934, mysteries unveiled about the meeting of Saint Germain, this Wonder Man mystic that was, at that time, would be 200 years old, was developed as a story by Guy Warren Ballard, also known as God Fear a King, and the whole spiritual community has grown out of that. The more modern legend is Telos, which is kind of the new Lemuria. And the most popular book was published in 2004, but it really grew out of the concept of Telos as defined by a man named George Williamson, who was an early UFO contactee with this man Adamski, who started the 1950s UFO trend, if you will. But in 1958, Telos was written about, but it wasn't Mount Shasta, it was the Colorado area. And later, in 1977, this woman named Bonnie Condé, also known as Charula Dux, claimed to be a princess who lived in an underground city in Mount Shasta. And she talked with William Hamilton, who published in 1980 Mount Shasta, Home of the Ancients. And that's really where the idea of Telos in the inner city of Mount Shasta, named Telos, began. I have a friend here who's a well driller, and he was doing some drilling up above that Shasta Springs area, probably 3 or 4 miles away. And he drilled down and he hit pure air, and it just rushed out and it was hollow underneath. So there may well be a nice lava tube, goes all the way down to Shasta Springs area from the mountain. There are subterranean areas all through this mountain, Mount Shasta, which is pretty interesting. And to me, my way, that just adds to the mystique, some credibility to the fact that there are underground passages. Certainly the Native Americans lived in some on the north side of the mountain. Pluto Cave in particular. It's a massively hollow cave that was the site of an Indian settlement. So that's pretty cool.